welcome to The Print. I am Devdatta, and today we are joined by Rishi Gupta, who is the Assistant Director for Asia Society Policy Institute in New Delhi, to discuss more on what is happening in Nepal. Now, as the news reports have already shown, there's a lot of upheaval that is happening in Nepal right now. The current Prime Minister has already resigned. It was a 1.5-day protest that led to the fall of the government, and a lot is left out in the open for discussion. What is the current scenario in Nepal like? Who are the prominent contenders? What happens from here? And to discuss more on these issues, we have Rishi with us. So thank you, Rishi, for joining us.
Always a pleasure. Thank you for having me.
So to firstly begin with, the most basic question that I would kind of ask you is, what do you think is the current situation in Nepal?
I think, as in your intro said, there are many moving parts right now. Currently, Prime Minister and the President both have resigned. So if I could say, if there was a president, I would say, okay, there will be a presidential, system coming in place. But right now, there is a entire open space with no clarity on who would lead the next. If you ask me, I don't have any ready-made answers. But what I can speculate would be one that since this entire movement or the protest was led by Gen Zs, I think the possibilities of a younger leadership taking the lead role is a possibility. Second might be that a lot of stakeholders, including students, something that happened in Bangladesh, that students on themselves come up with an option that this is the person that we would want as the interim prime minister or interim in charge of the country. And the third option that could be the case, that has been the case in the past, is judiciary takes the lead, or say a retired chief of, the Supreme Court judge takes the lead role for the interim phase. I think these are a few possibilities that I see forthcoming. But again, it's a very evolving situation right now. The people, or I would say the Gen Zs who were leading this protest, I don't know if they were really expecting this level of mass movement at the same time, that the entire system would come to a standstill. I don't think that was the plan, because they started a peaceful protest. Had there been no government action against what was happening, or against their peaceful protests, I don't think so this situation could have happened. But I think the second part, which I would like to add right now, is this event toppling. Prime Minister resigning, following whatever was happening in terms of protest. This is not just a standalone event. The entire situation was in the making for past several years. And if you want me to be precise, I would say 17 years. That is the phase when Nepal, that is the phase when the entire duration of Nepal's democratic evolution. Nepal became a democracy in 2008. Since then onwards, if you see, no leadership has been able to complete 5-year term in power. Every year you see at least one prime minister. Even in this, Oli was the third prime minister since 2022. So the political instability has been so deep in Nepal that there had been an entire frustration of the younger generation, that even the frustration was about lack of opportunities, a lot of corruption, nepotism, that certain leaderships, relatives promoted, or they were getting advantages from all across sectors, for example, in the businesses, in establishing hotels. So a lot of these things were there in the public. I think this was just a trigger point that, social media, ban on social media, and mind it, so ban on social media is just one part of the problem. Why did social media thing happen? Suddenly, only government woke up to say, all right, now all the social media platforms need to register in Nepal, despite the laws came last year and before that as well. Why did only government did not wake up? Why even the government was using, if they were not registered, why even the government was using these platforms? The government of Nepal had been really active on platforms like Twitter, X, formerly Twitter, on Facebook. I mean, so if government had any problems, then why did it not raise? So the timing of these new, this ban was certainly a matter of, I would say, it was other issues were camouflaged with this event in time. The entire episode was all about censorship. It was all about controlling the social media and narratives on social media. And mind it, Oli was the style that Oli has opted in last few years since he became. I mean, the first time he became the prime minister. I think his way of functioning was more allegedly dictatorial, which I don't think so for a democracy works for long. And I think that has culminated into what the present situation looks like. And if you have other questions on future, I'm happy to answer.
Yes, I will take it forward from there, but I will like to come back on something that you just mentioned on how, the protests in Nepal have been going on as far back as 2022. There were protests in 2023, there were protests in 2024, there were massive protests against the return of the monarchy, which then culminated in the recent 2025 March protests that even then saw two people being killed. And like you said, there was, Nepal has seen 14 governments in 16 years. So it's like a merry-go-round of the whole political situation as well. And then the frustration of the Gen Z that eventually erupted into this mass protest that we saw yesterday. But a very important point that you mentioned was how this is very similar to the protests that happened in Bangladesh. Even that was, a very youth-led protest, a lot of frustration against an authoritarian government and the way, things kind of happened there. Do you see any kind of, like we talked about earlier, any kind of similarities between the two protests and the kind of future that then Bangladesh saw? Now with hopefully elections being held in February, a year in with the interim government, lots of new leaders, a completely new party that was set up by the students. Going ahead, what kind of a future do you see for Nepal? Do you see, like we discussed, do you see the rise of, young Nepali politicians? A lot of names are now being seen as the PM contenders. One is the very popular face among the Gen Zs, which is the mayor, Balendra Shah. There's also this another person, the RSP leader, Rabi Lamechhane, who has been freed from jail by the same protesters. They stormed into jail today in Lalitpur. They took him out, and he came out, and the visuals went viral. So there are a lot of young youth contenders that are now within the political spectrum. If I had to ask you, would you see any kind of parallels between both the protests that happened and the kind of future that Nepal now is headed towards?
Oh, great set of questions, I would say, but I'll divide it in three. To start with, protests in Nepal. Protests in Nepal are not a new phenomenon. The entire 70 years of modern Nepal's political history, you would see n number of protests happening in Nepal. To begin with, in I would say the major one in recent history happened in 1990s when the political parties stood against the monarchy and a monarchy appointed government, saying that you need to reinstate the ban on political parties. It was an era of panchayat government, so government end of the day had to pave way, including government and monarchy had to pave way for by pave way for the political parties. The political parties were reinstated, and again within 4 years, another set of issues started. The Maoist party said we are really unhappy with the government. We would now want a complete change, and that's how the entire Maoist movement started taking shape in Nepal. And it took 10 fair years for democracy to come into Nepal. Again in 2006, that was a phase when people's movement started. Other people also, other than joined the Maoists, and finally, this became a big issue. International media, international organizations, India, and other countries, pitched in, and they finally, said, told the monarchy that was centuries old system in Nepal that controlled the government and the entire institutions in Nepal to, let people have a chance to decide on what is their future. So that is one. In recent years, if you see, people have protested against the constitution, people have protested against corruption, people have protested against, people have come on the roads, those who have been fed up, they wanted to reinstate the monarchy again, they wanted to restore monarchy again, because they thought, okay, at least if there was a corrupt person, it was just the king during monarchy, but here there is an entire system of corrupt people. So rather than relying on hundreds other people, let's have one guy in the room and let's do some better work with him. But that did not happen. So I think this was a moment where the current generation felt that the change makers could be from this generation, because the old guards, the people who have been in power in past 17 years, I'm not even going back, just I can count those names on my tip, which is KP Sharma Oli from MLA, chairman of the MLA, Pushkamal Dayal Prachanda of the Maoist Center, and then Sheikh Bahadur Deva of Nepali Congress. These three people have literally defined the political spectrum of last 10 years. They have not let any new leadership come in, and I think that's been the problem, because even if they understand or even if they hear what are the requirements of this generation or the younger generation, that they are frustrated, with lack of employment, lack of opportunities, and that's how everybody is trying to immigrate, migrate out of the country and find new employment opportunities, better education. But a country that is located between two Asian giant economies is unable to take benefit of that geography, rather than uses China card, India card against each other for all political advantages. I think that's been a sad affair of Nepal in past several years, and I think this protest is once again, like in 2006, this protest is once again defining Nepal's democracy in several senses. Second question was about if there are similarities. I would say, if I'm, finding it right, it's about Dhaka and Nepal. How Dhaka and Kathmandu, there are similarities, right? So I think obviously the youth is the center of both the movements. Youth have come on the roads; they have not been afraid that they might get killed. But I think what they have been able to convey, that force cannot be a means to stop them. Force and coercion cannot be a dictating spectrum of things that you can stop them from asking questions or from criticizing or hold free and fair, I would say, to hold protests in public spaces, which is a democratic right. So, in that sense, I would say there are certainly similarities. On new leadership, certainly Balin Shah and Ravi Lamichhane both are strong contenders. But again, look at their historical backgrounds. I mean, look at their political backgrounds. The allegations against Ravi Lamichhane are not normal allegations. There are strong allegations against him for misusing the funds. Also, about his citizenship, that remains in question. So I don't know if Gen Zs, there might be a section, I don't know if they're completely united, but there is entirely a section of youth that believes in the leadership of Ravi Lamichhane. But I don't know if he will be the right candidate to take up the leadership role. At the same time, Balin Shah, I mean, he's I would say, a kind of a populist leader. Uh, uh, he's enjoyed his popularity, and also his way of functioning or running the government has often been in question. So I would say on both, I doubt, At the same time, looking at the current scenario where there are no popular faces right now to lead the government, if the opportunity is given to a younger generation or a younger leadership, then any of these two could take the role, or if there is some third party or third candidate that I may not be able to predict right now.
On that note, Rishi, a very direct question to you. Do you think the protests will lead to a return of the monarchy? Since, beginning of the year saw a pro-monarchy protest. Uh, there have been protests right now, of course, by the youth against corruption, against years of, lack of employment. It's a very different generation of youth that is, currently protesting in Nepal. But earlier, protests were also held to ensure that there's a return of the king. 40,000 protesters had then stormed into the airport and they had asked for King Gyanendra to be back. Given the current political situation, do you think that Nepal can go back to a return of monarchy?
I would certainly say no, a straight answer no. For that to happen, I think the country will have to go back to 25 years of its history. Monarchy, for all good or bad reasons, was not something that promoted human rights. Monarchy was not something that was in the interest of people. And again, the way monarchy functioned, look, King Gyanendra in 2006, the kind of state machinery that he used against the people, it's his own people, was not something that can ever be appreciated. There was a chunk of people who welcomed King Gyanendra, which felt like he was coming from some third country and coming to Nepal, and there was a debate on number of people who welcomed him. Certainly, he was in his own country, traveled from one city to another, making a case out of it that welcome to Kathmandu King, and we'll get your palace back. And look, it's a democracy. The way democracy was achieved was a process in Nepal. It came at the cost of thousands of, if I'm not incorrect, at least 17,000 lives. People who were killed during Maoist insurgency. So I would say going back is not at all an answer. Uh, the process that I would say the opportunities that are currently available is making progress within the democratic system. That is, there was a frustration against the existing leadership. There was a frustration against their way of functioning. There was a frustration against their governance model. I think that needs to change. So it's a question of reform, not a question of bringing back the old guards, because the three, I would say the Oli, Prachanda, and Deuba, this trio, kept on ensuring that at least somebody comes to power. Even there have been times when the three altogether came to power, there was no space for opposition. So entire setup, the political setup that existed in Nepal was always in question. The entire, if there, okay, for example, there were elections in 2022. The mandate was not clear for anyone. But the first ranking party, that was the Nepali Congress, they at least had the mandate. They could form a government, but who led the government? A third ranking, a party that came third in elections, that was the Maoist Center. A party that did not have the mandate, its leader, Pushp Kamal Dahal Prachanda, was made the prime minister. So there, the structural problems that Nepal's democracy, Nepal's governance has had all these years, I think it needs to change, and for that, reforms have to take place rather than bringing back old guards.
And on that note, Rishi, one last question from you. A volatile neighborhood in India. What do you think India should, or how do you think India should proceed right now with regards to Nepal?
For that, again, I'll go back to history. India, in 2006, India was among the key facilitator of peace process. And throughout its peace journey, Nepal's peace journey, India has been a very strong supporter of the entire process, as well as the development partnership that India has offered to Nepal. I would say in the current scenario, anything that happens in Nepal has an spillover effect on India. We share a long border, at least, and all these areas are, and also a very unique border. That's an open border. That has, despite all the problems, remained open. There have been issues and challenges of smuggling. There have been issues of criminals crossing the border. Despite that, just to maintain and keep the ethos of the social and cultural connect between the two countries, I think the border has remained open. But coming back to what India should do or what India can do, I think India has made its position very clear in its statement that it is obviously following the developments in Nepal, and has asked all the parties to uh, you know not to follow the peace, to abide by the peace principles. At the same time, I would say India has always sided with the people of Nepal, their aspirations, and it is not up to India to decide what happens in Nepal. At the same time, any impact that India will face, India will have to upend its security structure. The security agencies are on high alert, and certainly there will be security challenges for India. And I think India has seen this in the past during Maoist insurgency, and if it is seen today, India, I am sure, is well equipped to deal with these challenges. One last message that India would certainly want to convey to the old guards in Nepal is to pave way for the younger generation, because that's where democracy may function, because old guards have literally failed the country in past several years.
Absolutely. On that very cautious and hopeful note, thank you so much, Rishi. This was extremely insightful. Thank you for your time.
Thank you so much. Love you.